Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the PBSC Podcast. Steve Moore and Mark Castleman here for episode number 246 with all of you, titled, What Do Independence and Interdependence Look Like in a Coupleship, where my partner continues to scan and lust. Try saying that 5 times fast and let us know how you do.
Seriously.
We got a pretty long submission with this. Full disclosure, I had to record that intro 2 other times before I got it right because I kept screwing it up, so we don't blame you if it's confusing to you too. But we did get a lengthy submission in by a partner, and usually we don't read ones this long, but she conveys things really well, and it is a little bit nuanced. So here we go. We'll go that way, and then we will jump right into answering her questions. And here's what she says. Hi, Mark and Steve. I would love for you to do a podcast where you explain more of what interdependence looks like for the betrayed spouse in a marriage as you move forward in recovery. I've been married to my husband for over 2 decades and continue to do my own recovery work. After his sexual addiction was discovered, I have heard that word used several times. I remember you all mentioning it at times as well, and honestly, I sometimes have trouble understanding what that looks like or feels like as a spouse. I have gotten to the place that I truly know in my soul that if he ultimately decides to live in his addiction and all the lying, that I don't have to be on the other side of that anymore, and I will be okay without him. I know his choices are his choices, and I have absolutely no control over that. I know there is nothing I can do or be to fix or change him. If my husband chooses to be, quote unquote, that guy, then I don't have to be his girl anymore. But working through those big truths out in my mind and in my heart has for some reason come easier for me lately than something smaller, say like watching him subtly scan or maybe even still get captivated at times and trying not to let it affect me because it's, quote unquote, his problem, not mine. His choice to be lustful, etc. When we go anywhere, I have this loop going on in my head of, I am beautiful just the way I am. God did not mess up. This has nothing to do with me. I know that's true, but it's exhausting. I get stuck in just the knowledge that my husband has an obsession with other women, not drugs, not alcohol, but my same species. So someone just like me. It just hurts and feels so incredibly personal, even though I know his addiction was there way before he even met me. I just don't want a marriage like that anymore. His sexual addiction is just a big fat soul and confidence crusher. It's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
If your wives noticed you scanning today at lunch, getting captivated by another woman, etc., would that even faze them now due to being interdependent from you, or interdependent with you, as the case would be? Do the triggering places even trigger them anymore, or are they so separated from your addiction now that they don't? Sometimes to me, interdependence comes across as like shrugging off or an, oh, well, it's his choice and it doesn't affect me type of thing. And I know that is probably not the right perspective. It feels like a completely new mindset and a lot of reframing. Is this a later recovery type of work? I'm not sure I could have even processed this in the beginning. I have come a long way over the last 15 years since disclosure. So she's been in this for quite some time. an insane amount of forwards and backwards, but I'm truly trying to understand why I tend to get stuck where I do. I have friends dealing with the same addictions in their marriages, and it's crazy to hear what does and does not bother them versus me and how different we take or see things. Sometimes those differences between my friends and I in this secret club no one wants to be a part of leaves me feeling weak, unconfident, and codependent, and yet other times feeling empowered in knowing the work I've done in recovery and in my own healing journey. I have such a huge heart for women who are walking through this. It's the hardest work I've ever had to do. I'm stronger though, and I'm grateful for the inner work, even in my marriage, even if my marriage doesn't work out. I know I will still be a better me. I apologize for the length of this letter, but if you could give some examples of what interdependence looks like from your wife's perspective and in healthy marriages such as yours and how they continue to grow in that new mindset, I would be so grateful.
Mm,
So a
wow.
lot there, but great submission. Great
Was a
submission.
great submission. Yeah, really. I love in that submission. It's probably one of the clearest expressions of somebody who's done their independent, right, sovereign independent side of the street work. She just states it so well, right? It'll be horribly painful, but I know if he chooses to continue to do these things, I will be okay without him.
Yeah.
Right. And she goes on to elaborate what that means for her. And you can just hear the crazy hard work she's done to get to that place. So we really applaud her for, really understanding what it means to be a sovereign, empowered, individual being to choose what you're going to do and what your boundaries are. Sounds like she's done a really good job of that.
Yeah. Well, and one thought just to add to that before we jump into this interdependence concept. I mean, this is just so we're all on the same page. This spouse has been in this dynamic for quite some time, right? We're talking about 15 years.
Yeah, a long
Um,
time.
and she doesn't go into terrible detail about the other things that he's doing in his recovery, but it does sound like to some degree, if we're to infer a little bit, he has definitely plateaued to a degree. 15 years into this work, the scanning piece should be something that is largely under control, I would say, by this point. That's a
Mm.
long time to be working on basic skill sets like that. And definitely around the transparency, talking about it, owning, proactive ownership, all the things we talk about here on the podcast and in Dare to Connect all the time. Those should be things that should be pretty well oiled by this point in terms of proactivity on his end. And so it is important to kind of understand, infer a little bit into where she's at if we're gonna kind of jump into some of these other things.
Well,
Um,
and that's a great intro, Steve, that you just gave as we look at this thing. What is interdependence? We like to use the word collaboration, coupleship collaboration, right? What does that look like? And we sensed in her submission, again, we have to read between the lines somewhat, but after 15 years since Disclosure Day, I would hope that this coupleship would be in a place where they are openly talking about these things that she says she still struggles with, that there's a, right? Because what is interdependence? And we're going to get into this, right? I've done my own individual empowering sovereign work on my side of the street. Both of them have. And now we bring all that to the table as a coupleship so that we can collaborate. We can be a team. I've got your back, you've got my back. And so it's really this no longer standing on opposite sides, but having done the work that you have control over, the accountability that you have, the responsibility that's on your side, and you've each worked that hard, you can now come together to truly be a team, a couple, right? That's the sense of interdependence and collaboration. And so, as we look at that, and Steve, is there anything you want to add about what is interdependence and collaboration?
I don't think so. I mean, really, I guess interdependence, right? We probably should just briefly talk about the spectrum that interdependence happens on so that we kind of understand where it references, right?
Mm-hmm.
If oftentimes Mark and I, like in our Dare to Connect program or in our offices, we will, draw a big long kind of timeline, right? A big long line across a whiteboard. And on the far left side, when I do that, usually I will put what we would call independence, right? Clinical independence. Now, we don't mean independence as in like healthy independence on my own person. The extreme form of this is I don't need anybody. I'm not connecting with anybody. Screw everyone else. It's all about me, right? That's what we would reference in terms of independence when it comes to connection with other people. So that would be the extreme side, which is not healthy or workable in relationships, because relationships require a partnership of some sort. On the other end of that spectrum, we have what is called codependence, a term that is often discussed and rarely understood. That kind of means a lot of different things, but kind of in its purest form, when I am codependent on another person, I am reliant on them for all sorts of different things, depending on the nature of the codependency, right? For example, a person who's highly codependent on another person looks to that person as kind of an emotional barometer. Or how should I feel today? Should I have a good day today or a bad day today? What's my value today? Am I worth something or am I not worth something, right? There's this almost exclusivity component where, because we're not cultivating internal messaging regarding our worth, our purpose, our mission, our whatever internally, because we're not doing that, we're looking to externals to dictate it for us.
Yeah.
And so those are the two extremes. Interdependence is this magical term, right, that kind of sits in the middle of that graph, where we retain the best qualities of both sides. In an interdependent place, I care about and am very much connected with the people around me. And I do very much look at and internalize in a healthy, filtered way the feedback, the input that the people close to me that I trust give me. However, I also retain the healthiest parts of that independent side, which means that even though others can help to inform my value, my worth, my purpose, my whatever, at the end of the day, the decisions always come back to me. I am in control of my own individual standing. And that combination of that sense of elements is what creates this person who is able to emotionally stand on their own 2 feet, but retains the ability to be able to connect, collaborate, and build with somebody else.
Yeah. Well, and the key to what you just said, where we have to start with this discussion, is you cannot be interdependent until you have learned to be healthily independent.
Yes.
Right? You and I talk all the time about the authentic self. What is the higher me, the truer me? What is the healthy me? Right? What does that look like? And what am I doing to cultivate that on a daily basis? Right? So what does healthy independence or the authentic self look like for the addict recovering from porn and sex addiction? Right? Because he can't come to the table and be interdependent and collaborative with his healing partner unless he's also concurrently doing his own healthy, independent, and authentic self work. Right. So this includes things like developing my own outside support system that is not dependent on my partner. Right. Developing out a relationship with my higher power, whatever that means to me. Engaging in mindful living, where I'm journaling on a daily basis. I'm learning to step back to be a watcher and observer of my thoughts and my feelings. What am I feeling and why am I feeling it? Right? Learning as an addict in recovery to begin to notice, not waiting for someone to catch me, quote, catch me in the act, or my partner to do detective work or whatever else. I'm proactively and I am intentionally starting to pay attention to what are the early steps that start to lead me toward that old acting out behavior. Am I paying attention to those things and intervening for myself earlier and earlier in the process? Right? This is all the independent, healthily independent work that I'm doing, separate from my partner or my spouse. Right? All the stuff that's going on my side of the street.
Yeah, there are lots of ways to look at this concept of interdependence, but for me, I guess one lens you could look at it through, this resonates with Steve's brain, so take that for what it means. But it almost is an act of kind of ultimate acceptance around myself and others. And what I mean by that is, if I'm in a place of ultimate acceptance about my reality, my value, my worth, my capacity, as well as that of all of those categories about that of the other people, that among other things means 2 truths. One, I am human and I'm flawed, and I can't do life alone. Right? I need the support of other people around me. Life was never meant to be lived alone. It's not, it is good to be surrounded and connected with other people, because the formulation of the group is greater than the sum of its parts. On the other hand, however, it is also the acceptance that the people and resources around me are also inherently flawed, right? And so it's a recognition that we are here to build and grow together, but that an over reliance on either the external or the internal is going to be problematic.
Yeah.
Right. So that might be another way to kind of
Yeah,
look at
I
it.
love that. And we talk, we talk about what the addict in recovery can be doing, and equally important, we also talk about what the betrayed partner, what does her healing look like? What does it mean for her to be healthily independent and authentic in what she's doing? And you and I talk a great deal about that in our Dare to Connect program, about what this whole thing looks like for partners, right? But again, she has her own outside support system. She's engaging in her own process of stepping back to watch and observe her feelings and what she's going through and why she's experiencing it. She's engaging in her own daily self-care to renew and recharge. She's building her own sense of worth separate from him, right? What he does or doesn't do, what he thinks or doesn't think, doesn't affect her value, her worth, right? Her amazingness as a sovereign human being. Right? There's all these aspects of healing from betrayal trauma that are my side of the street and what I can do. Right? The big thing, Steve, you and I have been putting a lot of emphasis lately in Dare to Connect on what we call the Dare to Connect culture of empowerment. How can I be empowered at the highest level possible in what I'm doing on my side of the street? How can my addict partner be empowered? And how can two empowered individuals now come together to collaborate and to be interdependent? Right? That sense of individual empowerment is something we talk about constantly.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of places to go with this, right? Because this is a huge topic, as many of you can, as you can definitely understand, or might be able to appreciate. Uh, if we're gonna, let's maybe talk a little bit about what can get in the way of this, right? What disrupts one's own independent or authentic self and the healing process behind it?
The
Because
disruptors.
yeah, because there are a lot of things that can get in the way of this. So I guess we'll break this down into both an addict as well as a betrayed partner. Okay, so we can kind of touch on a little bit what's going on for each of these people. We can definitely speak from the personal side or the addict side. So when I was in early recovery, I mean, I was horribly, horribly codependent on Brittany for a whole lot of things. I looked to her to lead out in things that she didn't need to lead out on, and I very much looked to her to essentially determine my worth and or if we in the relationship were quote unquote okay. And there were a lot of reasons why that was. A lot of it had to do with my own internal sense of worthlessness, right? The shame, not healthy guilt, but toxic shame that I carried as being quote unquote the addict, being quote unquote the guy who ruined the marriage, being quote unquote, the screw up, the black sheep, the whatever. And I very much was operating from a place that I didn't deserve to have a place at the table in the marriage. I was just lucky to eat scraps from my wife's feet, and we weren't in an egalitarian place at all. And because of that, I was looking for my wife to supply things emotionally and otherwise to the relationship that she was not capable of doing,
Yeah.
even if she wanted to, nor was it appropriate. Um, and so I think that a lot of those disruptors for us stem from those internal insecurities that we carry, many of which are shame based, but also maybe our lack of skill set or traumas that we've experienced as addicts over time that make it difficult for us to see either how to show up or to feel like we have an entitlement, really a healthy entitlement to and an obligation as well to show up.
Right.
Different ways.
And part of those disruptors for addicts is when recovery is hard, navigating these new directions in our relationships is crazy hard. Thing falls apart, we fall on our faces, and our tendency to run back to old patterns of perceived safety, old patterns of coping, falling back into avoiding, escaping, minimalizing, rationalizing, all those old habits. We can, if we're not working it each day consistently, we can easily fall back into that old stuff. And now we leave that place of healthy independence and we go back into codependence, because what is addiction? Addiction is codependency. I am dependent on my addiction outlets to cope with life. Right? It's the classic definition of that. And so anything that will take me back into that world will take me off the track of healthy independence. So very much the case for an addict.
Absolutely. Yeah. On the other hand, we have betrayed partners, right? And they can reference and many of their struggle around disrupting that recovery path also stems from internal insecurity, sometimes from shame. Oftentimes, the sad reality is that many partners have been extensively gaslit, lied to, manipulated over time to the point of they carry with them serious self-worth and deficits, emotional deficits as a result of that. And sometimes those didn't just stem from the current relationship that may have happened in family of origin, past relationships, those kinds of things. In addition to that, though, I think that one of the biggest things that we need to talk about here is the betrayal itself. We talk about betrayal all the time on the podcast here, and one of the things that we know about betrayal, in fact, we just had a lengthy discussion in our Dare to Connect program with the partners of addicts who subscribed to the program last week about this. This idea of betrayal is very much it represents, among other things, a loss for a partner. And it's a loss of a couple of things. It's a loss of the addict partner that they thought that they knew. It's also a loss of the relationship that they thought they had. And when the bottom falls out on something as significant of that, what we see in the history or in the progression of betrayal is that when the brain questions something that's on that high order of magnitude, anything else below that, so to speak, on the totem pole of truth is also subject for potential review and possibly not being believed in anymore as well.
Absolutely.
So partners very much will find themselves struggling to process or understand how can I even trust my own gut? Right? I was with this guy for 5, 10, 20, 50 years. I never knew any of this was going on. I made kids with this guy. I had a relationship with the guy. I took this guy to my bed. I did all these different things, and here I am. And if he could pull this over my eyes, or if I could miss this, maybe I'm missing all sorts of things.
Yeah. How could I ever be a healthily independent person based on that history?
Yes. And so they really struggle from that side as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we could talk a lot about what disrupts that whole process, but, yes. But let's say that you're in a coupleship and that you are doing the work, progressing towards healthy independence and in your own authenticity. How do independent and authentic partners then progressively move into a place of interdependence? Right? You're trying to do your work on your side of the street. And so how do you now start to, quote, come together? I think it's one of the things that, Steve, you and I see a lot is this misunderstanding about a really clear point. We have to clearly know that what it means to, quote, own my side of the street, to step into my voice, my truth, my sovereignty, right? My empowerment. And then I'm working on that each day. We have to keep that process going in order to be able to then come to the coupleship, right? It's really important to notice any early signs that you're starting to leave that realm. Am I starting to, so for example, I'll talk to about betrayed partners. Am I starting as a betrayed partner to, quote, let down on my boundaries a bit? Am I starting to stop doing my individual work? Am I starting to tapping regularly into my outside support system? Because as things get a little bit better as a coupleship, we could say, okay, good to go now. Let's focus entirely on the coupleship and let the rest, I go back to, quote, normal and the rest of that stuff. We have to be really careful about continuing our own healthily independent path so that we can then come together as a coupleship. Right. And there's lots of those signs for us as addicts in recovery when we can easily start to stray from the path of healthy recovery, healthy living. Right.
Yeah. I think that, I think this is one of the reasons what Mark touched on is one of the reasons why we so heavily recommend some sort of involvement with a good 12-step program, wherever you're at in the recovery process, because right out the gate, whatever a good 12-step program whatever else it will do for you is it helps one begin to identify very clearly which parts of this equation can I control and which parts of this can I not.
Yeah, so critical.
That reallocation of resources, especially for partners and addicts who are struggling with limited resources to begin with emotionally, is absolutely critical. The other component that I think that as we move towards this, I mean, if we're looking at actual steps to take, right? What does that actually mean? What does it actually look like, right? Because I'm sure that's what everyone listening to this right now is asking. Okay, so what does that mean?
Yeah.
And it kind of centers back on, in some ways, at least to begin with, on what we talked about right at the beginning of this podcast. What are you bringing with you to the coupleship?
Yes.
Right. We're all geared. I think it's a societal thing. We're all very much geared towards looking to the other person. And there are a couple reasons for that. One, it's cultural, but I think two, emotionally, it's always easier to look outward rather than to focus inward. Right. So we tend to always kind of subconsciously just gear towards, okay, well, what are they doing or not doing? Right. What do they bring to the table, or what are their deficits? What are their strengths? What are their assets? But are we meeting in the middle with our partners, having done that that honest self-assessment with ourselves individually extensively first, having made the changes that need to be made?
Yeah.
Right. If I'm coming to a coupleship, anytime a coupleship comes together, okay, and in whether that's as a whole or in any sort of engagement, what is the state of that coupleship? It's an amalgam of whatever the two people are bringing to it. Sometimes I think we almost look to the coupleship as some sort of third party entity that will bear us through if we haven't done our part. When the reality is it's just a combination of where's my partner at and what are they bringing to the table? Where's my other partner at and what are they bringing to the table? And how transparent can we be around that? Mark, actually, earlier on in a Dare to Connect session this week, we have these little segments that we do at the beginning of each session that we've started recently called D2C splashes. And they're just kind of a little thought that can be either about what we're talking about that day. And this last month, we're wrapping up the triggers process right now, but they can also be tied to other things as well, just to kind of get the group going. And Mark shared a really brief video clip from Brene Brown, where she talked pretty vulnerably about her husband, whose name is ironically Steve. She talked about the dynamic between her and her husband, where they will be very transparent with each other about how much they're realistically bringing to the table in terms of their full selves. And sometimes that's 10%, sometimes it's 20%, sometimes it's 90%. And they have a discussion about what are each of us bringing to the table. And then they, from there, being honest where they're at, that helps to dictate what level can they engage with each other, what topics can they collaborate on that evening versus not, right? It sets a very realistic stage for what is the level of cohesion going to look like for that night.
Yeah.
And that same kind of transparency needs to happen with each of us. We need to be each self-assessing and asking ourselves, where am I really at today? One, have I done the best work to bring my best version of me that I can achieve here to the table today? And two, what does that person represent? Because maybe I've just gotten the crap kicked out of me today, and despite all of my very best efforts, I've got 50% to bring to the table, right? What does that mean? Where are my assets and where are my deficits, and how clearly can I communicate that to my partner? Being able to do that on both sides of the coin will, one, help you avoid tremendous amounts of, like a huge percentage of the problems that usually happen when a coupleship tries to come together on a difficult issue. But the second piece that it will do is it helps to create an accountability for each of us, right? And that understanding of I need to be showing up with my best self rather than questioning my partner's Sunday best, quote unquote, and whether they're wearing it or not. Did I throw mine on?
Yeah.
Right? Did I put mine on?
Well, and I love what you're describing, Steve, because it's another really important point. We need to come together as a coupleship and agree on something really critical. Are we both willing to interrupt long-standing, emotionally intense and reactive relationship patterns? Right? Are we willing to interrupt how this always goes? And the Brene Brown example you gave is one where she and her husband decided they weren't going to do it the reactive way anymore, right? I've had a crappy day, a crappy week. I show up with 10% capacity, but I'm not going to tell you that. We're just going to second guess each other and try to mind read and make assumptions and expectations. They said, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to interrupt that old pattern and we're going to talk. We're going to be clear. We're going to be transparent. So you start to establish clear, like in all caps, clear communication boundaries in what we will and won't do when we come together. So for example, my wife and I used to have really reactive communication patterns, and we would either end up arguing or I would go stoic and disappear, and then she would feel abandoned, and here we go in the same old downward spiral. We agreed that we were no longer going to allow ourselves to participate in those old communication patterns. So what did that involve for us? A really rudimentary tool we talk about in Dare to Connect all the time: take a break. And you can I think we've done some podcasts on take a break. You can look at how those are done. But we said every time we start, one or both of us notices we're straying into old negative patterns, one or both are going to exercise the discipline and the courage and quite frankly, the love to take a break. We're not going to allow these negative patterns to keep destroying our relationship. So every time we keep communicating in that old negative way, we're not helping the relationship. We're further tearing it down. So we're going to start to put these processes and tools and agreements in place to break out of the old ways. Right? Very important.
Yeah.
Now, I had a note for it was kind of for the old Mark. Okay, take a break every time it starts to be uncomfortable or the conversation's not going well. Take a break. I would have weaponized that in my early to mid recovery. Okay, my wife's saying something hard. I don't want to hear it. We're taking a break because Mark and Steve said you should always take a break whenever communication isn't perfect. So I would have avoided leaning in, sitting in her pain with her, and all the things that are so essential because we need to take a break every time this gets uncomfortable. So be careful with that. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah. No, I would very much agree with that. And this process, right, of coming back together. One thing that we can't skip over, we didn't even put this in our notes today, but accountability. So often in coupleships and even with ourselves, to be honest with you, individually, when we're doing this work, sometimes we don't take the time for a variety of reasons to exercise accountability and to look at what went wrong and take ownership for it.
My ability to account for my side of the equation, my side of the coupleship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like if we screw up, which we inevitably are going to, okay? One of the things to keep in mind when you're having a discussion about codependency, independence, and interdependence, plan on jacking it up. Okay. You're going to.
Sure.
It's not a question because relationships are constantly in a state of flux. Nobody achieves perfect interdependence in any relationship ever. And even if you were able to, something small will happen in the conversation, which will shift the razor's edge tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay. This is something that we all are striving for. It's the sunrise on the end of the horizon that we just keep steering the ship to, knowing that the white waves keep tossing us different directions.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're going to really be serious about this concept of interdependence, embracing interdependence and the quest for it means embracing imperfection and the need to make amends. There is no way around that. You can talk to any world expert, Brene Brown included, and they will tell you the same thing.
Well,
Okay?
and that leads into this other thing, Steve. You and I wish someone had really sat us down and told us this next little nugget. Why do you continue to try to practice these new relationship skills in nothing but reactive situations?
Yes.
We couldn't understand why we kept failing, right? Because we'd wait for the heat of the moment to use our new tools and our new approaches. And why do we keep failing? Why do we keep doing this same old dance? And it's because we need to stop just waiting for heat of the moment reactive situations to try to do all this and do it intentionally, proactively out of those scenarios. So work on healthy communication and collaboration during your personal journaling and time with your higher power. Work through scenarios in your own journaling. Here's what I've done in the past. Here's how it feels. Here's how I'm going to try to be more mindful and do it different. Bring it into your daily couples check-ins. Talk about scenarios where things could fall apart. Hey, we're gonna go out to dinner this Friday. That's been a horribly triggering thing because you've scanned in the past. And I've gotten angry and shut myself down. How can we collaborate right now to talk about how we're going to have a plan for that and do it different? Right? Weekly partnership meetings. Are you taking opportunities not just in the reactive moment to try to do all of this interdependence and collaboration, but to do it beforehand, to plan it out, to do it when you're in calm moments, when you're in your better self and better place? Right? That practice cannot be more. We can't say that enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, we appreciate you being here with us while we've taken this short dive into a very, very short and shallow dive into a very deep topic.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot more to say about this. If you like these podcasts and you like the conversations, the discussions, the rawness, the realness, the bad jokes, the banter, the idiocy, some would term, intelligent idiocy, if such a thing exists, we lovingly suggest that you will love the Dare to Connect program. Dare to Connect offers literally over, what are we up to? 35, 36 hours, something like that, plus of content, and ever in a month of both live and interactive, as well as pre-recorded content, a D2C Academy with an ever-growing list of courses ranging from formal disclosure to other topics that are the next one being healthy sexuality that we're releasing. An interactive support group system where you can ask us questions, get answers to your questions right now, rather than waiting months on the podcast. We would love for you to have come and join us and try the Dare to Connect program. We do have a 2-week free trial for that. You can pick up at daretoconnectnow.com. That's daretoconnectnow.com. We'd love to have you come over and see what it's all about.
Yeah.
And to also send us any questions that you were okay getting a United States Postal Service slow mail version of response to. You are always welcome to send those to us at, through the contact form. Loving, we get through those as quick as we can. It's just not as quick.
Yeah.
You can send those to us at pbsepodcast.com. There's a contact form down at the bottom there that you can submit those to us. So we'd love to hear from you that way as well.
Well, and as we close up, we just invite all of us to recognize this is a difficult process. We're just so proud of all of you for even taking on any of this. Just please realize that it is a process, not a destination. So be patient with yourselves, be patient with your partner, give grace where grace can be given, and just don't give up. Keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And over time, you'll get there. So
as long as progressive victories are happening, change and healing are possible.
That's right.
When somebody gives up or stops making progress, that's where we have a problem. So, all right, guys, have a great weekend. We will catch you in the next one.
Right. Take care.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.